Amamira, 24, navigates a suffocating marriage marked by Jace's emotional manipulation. A simple refusal to fetch ice cream sparks his cold rejection, blocking her on WhatsApp, ignoring her pleas. This small act unveils a pattern of control, silence, and gaslighting. Amamira's journey from self-doubt to self-discovery unfolds as she reclaims her voice, sets boundaries, and quietly plans her escape. With courage, she moves out, choosing herself over a love that diminished her. This poignant tale of resilience will leave you wondering, what does it take to break free? Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more heartfelt narratives. Share your thoughts in the comments, like and follow to support our mission of sharing diverse, thought-provoking stories. Amamira's heart twisted as she stared at her phone. The screen reflected her own anxiety, but it was the notification from WhatsApp that sent a chill through her. She saw the shift, subtle but undeniable. His profile was empty, no picture, no status, a cold void. He had blocked her. Blocked her. The words rattled around in her head like a cruel joke. It was, in a way, the most honest thing he'd done in weeks. The day had begun like any other, a relentless march of duties, routine tasks that seemed to repeat themselves like the ticking of an unforgiving clock. The hum of the washing machine, the clatter of dishes, the monotonous beep of the oven timer, it was the soundtrack of her life. But today it felt different. Not bad necessarily, but tiring in a way that left her empty. She had cooked, she had cleaned, and she had hoped. Hoped that all these little acts would somehow bridge the growing distance between them, pull him back from whatever cold, unreachable place he'd disappeared into. She had baked chocolate chip cookies, the scent filling the kitchen like a reminder of the love she poured into this home. But it wasn't for her. No, it was for him, to show him that she cared, that she was still trying. She could only pray he would notice, just for a moment, the warmth she was offering. By the time she finished everything, Amamira felt like she had run a marathon in slow motion. Her legs ached, her back protested, and her mind buzzed with half-formed thoughts. She just wanted to rest. Just a moment, a tiny, sacred moment of quiet. She glanced at the clock, 9:14 p.m. Time to retreat, to let the night wash over her. She moved to the bedroom, her limbs heavy, the blanket warm as it cocooned her. Finally, she allowed herself the luxury of stillness. But before she could even close her eyes, his voice pierced through the calm. "Hey, could you bring me some ice cream?" Amamira froze, a hollow feeling creeping into her chest. It wasn't that she didn't want to help him. She always did, endlessly so. But for the first time in the day, her body was telling her it was time to stop. Stop giving, if only for a moment. She was exhausted. "No, I'm doing something else right now," she said softly, keeping her voice even, not angry, not cruel, just tired. She needed a moment, a tiny boundary, something she hoped he would understand. But the silence that followed was thick with tension. She could almost feel the temperature in the room drop. His response, when it came, was a whisper of ice. "Fine, whatever. Go do whatever else you have going on." The words felt like shards, cold and cutting, wrapped in that all-too-familiar passive-aggressive tone, a tone that meant so much more than it ever let on. Immediately, guilt surged through her. Had she said it wrong? Should she have just gone to get the ice cream? Was she being selfish? Her body, already aching from the day, moved automatically toward the kitchen, but her heart raced with that familiar dread. "Make it. It's fine." Her voice trembled, a quiet plea to smooth over the moment before it spiraled further. But he didn't even look at her, didn't acknowledge her effort. "If you make it, I'm not eating it," he muttered, dismissing her completely. The sting of his rejection hit her harder than she expected. It was as though her attempt to please him, to show care, had been erased. Just like that. Erased. He slid on his headphones, the universal sign of "I'm done talking to you." She tried to reach for his attention, a tentative touch, but he wouldn't even meet her eyes. She was invisible. She was a ghost in her own home. "And can we talk?" she asked, her voice so soft it barely broke the silence. Nothing. Nothing but the hum of the headphones, a barrier she couldn't cross. She tried again, her voice almost a whisper now. "Hey, I didn't mean to upset you, I just needed a second." But still, nothing. He was distant, so far away in a way that made her feel like a stranger. Then, as though finally acknowledging her presence, he turned to her, his words like ice. Go do whatever it is you were doing. The way he said go made it clear. She didn't belong there. Not in his space, not in his life. She retreated. Slowly, painfully, she returned to the bedroom, each step heavier than the last. The bed was the only sanctuary, but even it couldn't comfort her. She sat on the edge, staring at the floor, trying to grasp how this small disagreement had twisted into something so monumental. The anger, the hurt, the confusion, they all mixed in a swirl of emotions she couldn't untangle. She waited, calmed her breath. Then, gathering the little courage she had left, she returned to the living room, her voice barely audible. I'm free now. He didn't even spare her a glance. Sad, I don't want to do anything with you. Just go. Her eyes burned. A lump rose in her throat. Oh, you're being mean, she whispered, her voice trembling, the hurt seeping through. I'm not, he shot back flatly. You're overreacting. You're gaslighting again. And then, as if on cue, the silence settled in once more. Heavy, suffocating, it pressed down on her like a wet blanket, drowning her in its weight. Silence. The worst kind of punishment. Not shouting, not raised voices, but that silence. It was the silence of erasure. The silence that said, you don't matter. He stood up, walked to the bathroom, and shut the door behind him without a single glance back. She couldn't even remember the last time he'd looked at her like she mattered. In the bedroom, she shut the door behind her and let the tears fall. She didn't even try to stop them. The hurt was bad enough, but what really shattered her was the familiarity of it. How this dance, this routine, was so well worn now. She had cooked, cleaned, sacrificed, and when she set a boundary, even the tiniest one, she was punished for it. Why does it always end like this, she wondered, her mind whirling. Why can't he handle a no? She tried to reach out, tried to break through the wall he'd built. A message, then a call, then another message, still no reply. His phone sat untouched on the bathroom counter, a cruel reminder that he was choosing to ignore her. And then she saw it, his WhatsApp profile, blank, no picture, no status, nothing. The shift was small, but in that moment, it was everything. He had blocked her. She had been erased. The familiar sting of abandonment rose in her chest, sharp and bitter. It all started so differently, so beautifully. She remembered it like it was yesterday. Rushing through the hallway, coffee in one hand, notes in the other, when she bumped into him. The coffee splashed, notes scattered, and she was left scrambling in embarrassment. But then he spoke, a calm voice breaking through her flurry of apologies. Well, that's one way to get my attention. And she looked up, seeing him for the first time. Jace, tall, a little scruffy, with a smile that felt effortless. And just like that, he pulled her in. Their connection felt immediate, like some cosmic alignment. She smiled back, trying to ignore the way he made her feel seen, like she was the only one who mattered. They stood together in line, laughing over something trivial, but it was easy. So easy. The way he made her feel understood. Special. But now that ease was gone. In its place, the weight of unspoken words, of things left unsaid. The boundaries she had set, so simple, so small, had become the chasm between them. And once again, it was her fault. Her tears, raw and unbidden, spilled over. A quiet storm that broke in front of him for the first time. He didn't move. He didn't even flinch. He simply sat there, arms crossed over his chest, an invisible wall between them, waiting for her to apologize. And she did. Because when things were good, when they were good, they were intoxicatingly perfect, Tribo. His lips on her forehead, his whispers about how she was the only one who truly understood him, that no one else could see past his walls the way she did. Those words held a magic she had never known before. They were the anchor in a storm she never thought would come. So she stayed. Even as the fights grew more frequent, as his mood shifted unpredictably, as silence began to creep in like an unwanted guest, she stayed. The silences stretched, sometimes for days, with him retreating into himself, leaving her in a constant state of anxious wondering. What had she done wrong? What had changed? She learned eventually how to navigate him, how to soften her tone, to shrink herself into something smaller, more palatable, how to apologize without knowing what for. She stopped wearing lipstick because he said it made her look like she was trying too hard. She erased old photos, changed how she dressed, how she moved, all in the name of love. But somewhere deep in Hollywood, she knew this wasn't love. It was something far more insidious. Yet she told herself that this was what love required, that love meant sacrifice, that real love meant adjusting, bending. What she didn't see, what she refused to see, was that only she was doing the adjusting. The proposal came in their third year together. It was quiet, intimate, just the two of them. No grand gestures, no sweeping declarations. He said he didn't like crowds, that their love was special, just for them. Something about that, something in the simplicity, made her heart flutter. She said yes. They married on a soft, gray April day, a small ceremony, a few close friends, but her sister Isla had always been skeptical. She'd once whispered, "He's charming, but something about him makes my skin crawl." Amamira had laughed it off, assured her that Isla just didn't understand him the way she did. But now, as the years wore on, she couldn't help but wonder if Isla had seen something she hadn't. Because somewhere along the way, the warmth had drained away, leaving only coldness in its wake. The loving gestures grew sparse. The silences grew louder. His passive digs became a familiar soundtrack to her days. The shift was gradual, so slow that it was nearly imperceptible at first. No one moment stood out. It was the accumulation of 1,000 small ones, 1,000 invisible cuts. The worst part? It was that there was no evidence, no smoking gun, just a creeping sense that she no longer fit in her own skin. And still, she stayed. Not because she was weak, but because she remembered the man he used to be, the boy who helped her pick up spilled notes in the hallway, the man who kissed her shoulder while she brushed her teeth, the man who held her in the early mornings as if she was the whole world. She kept holding out hope, waiting for that version of him to come back. But instead, she learned to read him like a book she no longer wanted to open. The way his mood shifted without warning. The way his silences felt like knives tucked into soft velvet pockets. The way she could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating, before he'd even spoken. She'd learned how to walk on eggshells, how to soften her voice, how to become smaller and smaller until she barely existed at all. It wasn't until the ice cream incident, the night she simply said no, that the truth hit her like a slap across the face. This wasn't just a rough patch. This wasn't something that could be fixed with more patience, with more compromise. This was control. This was manipulation. The man who had once promised to protect her heart was now the one breaking it in slow, insidious ways. And she had let it happen because she didn't know how to stop it. The signs were subtle at first, like the way he'd get distant for a day or two, claiming it was stress or work. She'd give him space, try to make his favorite meal, leave him room to breathe without suffocating him. But the space didn't bring them closer. It became the new normal. When she finally asked, with quiet desperation, if something was wrong, he dismissed her. "You're overthinking," he said, his tone flat, uninterested. When she told him how alone she felt, he sighed, his eyes vacant. "I can't be your emotional punching bag." And when she cried, when the dam finally broke, he rolled his eyes. "Here we go again," he muttered, his voice dripping with disdain. That night, her tears were muffled into the folds of a towel on the bathroom floor, a hollow sobbing that he didn't acknowledge. He didn't ask if she was okay. He didn't care. Amamira had kept journals then, out of habit, out of need. Scrawled entries that were half confusion, half desperate plea for answers she would never get. March 18th. He laughed at something I said today. Really laughed. It made me feel like I still exist. April 2nd. I told him I miss us. He said, "Maybe you miss the fantasy of us." April 19th. I spent 2 hours making dinner. He ate in silence. No thank you. Not even eye contact. April 2007. He blocked me on WhatsApp after I asked if we could talk. Unblocked me the next day like nothing happened. The pattern began, blocking and unblocking, a light switch he flicked on and off without warning, a tool he used to punish her in ways that never left marks. At first, she thought it was a fluke, but soon she could sense it before it happened. She could feel the tension in her gut when the switch flipped. Each time it did, something inside her chipped away, and each time he unblocked her, she convinced herself that this time would be different. But it never was. Her friendships began to wither, one by one. At first, she would turn down plans, then cancel them, then let them slip away entirely. One by one, they fell away, like leaves in the wind, and she let them. Because she didn't know how to ask for help. Because she didn't know if there was anything left worth saving. And so, she stayed. Amamira stood frozen in the doorway, her fingers trailing lightly along the edge of the kitchen counter, her heart hollowing with each silent minute that passed. The sharp, hollow sound of the refrigerator's hum seemed louder than usual, almost mocking in its indifference to the storm raging quietly within her. Jace sat on the couch, headphones on, the screen in front of him drawing all of his attention, his face as unreadable as ever. Amamira didn't expect him to look up. She never really did anymore. Just say no, she had whispered to herself earlier, the words now hanging in the air like a dull ache. A small, tired no. A no born from fatigue, from the unspoken weight of everything she'd been silently shouldering. But this no, this small, exhausted protest, had shattered something in her that she hadn't even realized was breaking. Jace's response, or rather his lack of one, was almost worse than the quiet, distant rejection she had feared. The blankness of it, the utter absence of warmth or consideration, it hit her harder than any cruel word ever could. Her hand hovered over her phone, shaking slightly as she thumbed through old messages. Old group chats filled with laughter, with genuine connection, before all of this. Before the quiet erosion of her self-worth, before the consistent pattern of emotional neglect that she had slowly come to accept as normal. Maya's text was a lifeline, an echo from a past where things hadn't been like this, where she still felt like herself. Hey, are you okay? We haven't seen you in forever. The message blinked up at her, too bright against the dim room. Amamira hesitated. She had to reply, didn't she? But what could she say? What could she possibly explain? That she was drowning in a life that had once been full? That she was tired of pretending, tired of shrinking herself just to avoid triggering another silence from Jace? Yeah, just been busy. Everything's good. She pressed send, but even the smiley face at the end felt like a betrayal. It was a lie one she had perfected over the years. She hadn't smiled in days, and every word she typed now was a careful construction. A fragile facade holding back the flood of emotion threatening to break her. The silence in the apartment was suffocating, heavy in its stillness. In the beginning, it had been easy to dismiss the small signs, the way Jace's eyes would drift past her, the way his responses became more clipped, more distant. But now, in the wake of that no, that single quiet refusal, everything felt different. It wasn't just about the headphones or the ice cream anymore. It was about her, about the small, cruel ways her existence had come to feel like an afterthought. The whispers had become too loud to ignore. They told her she was too sensitive, that her needs were too much, that if only she tried harder, if only she gave more, maybe he would come back to her. But Amamira had begun to believe those whispers, letting them shape her reality until tonight. Her hand still gripped the phone, her thumb hovering over the screen. She wanted to reach out again, send another message, make him understand that she hadn't meant to hurt him, that she was just trying to breathe. But there was no response. She called, once, twice. Each ring, unanswered, echoed in her chest like a cruel joke, a reminder that he wasn't just rejecting her in the moment. He was choosing to disappear, to erase her, to silence her until there was nothing left but a hollow shell of what they used to be. And then it happened. The cold realization hit her like a punch to the stomach. He had blocked her. His profile photo was gone. The last seen timestamp was blank. Gone. She stared at the screen, willing it to change, wishing she could reach out to him through the void, through the space he had created between them. But there was nothing, just the cold, mocking emptiness of the screen. It wasn't just a fight anymore. It was a statement. And that statement was simple. I don't care enough to fix this. Her heart twisted. an ache so deep and so raw she wondered if she might be hollowing out from the inside. This wasn't about ice cream or the headphones or even the words they had exchanged. This was about how small she had become in her efforts to be loved, how she had bent, twisted, and fractured herself just to hold on to him, just to keep the peace, and now the cost of that submission was becoming painfully clear. She returned to the bedroom, her steps slow, measured. The room felt strangely empty despite the soft glow of the bedside lamp. She collapsed onto the edge of the bed, her body heavy with exhaustion, her hands limp in her lap. For a long moment, she just sat there, numb, her mind swirling with the weight of everything unsaid. The silence pressed against her like a wall, and it wasn't until the first tear fell, just a single trembling drop, that she realized how long she had been holding it all in. The flood came after that. Quiet at first, just a slight quiver of her lips, then faster, harder, until her chest was tight with sobs she couldn't suppress. This wasn't just the pain of tonight, but the culmination of every night before it. Every time she had swallowed her hurt, every time she had hidden her needs just to avoid setting him off. Every time she had convinced herself that love, in its purest form, meant sacrifice, meant losing yourself to keep the peace. And now this, one small boundary, one tiny moment where she had simply said no, and she was met with silence, with rejection. Not for anything she had done wrong, but because she dared to exist outside the narrow confines of his expectations. She reached for her phone, the trembling in her fingers unbearable now. She texted him, a simple, desperate plea. "Hey, I didn't mean to upset you. Can we just talk?" No response. Text 2. "I just wanted a moment to breathe. I've been going all day and I wasn't trying to hurt you." Still nothing, and then she called. Once, twice, the ringing echoed in her chest like a cruel reminder. He didn't pick up. He wasn't gone. He was here with her, but he was withholding himself. He was punishing her with silence, with absence, and she couldn't make sense of it. The power he wielded in his refusal to engage felt more like a weapon than anything else. She had been erased. The screen was empty now. He had blocked her. There was nothing left. The small circle of their love had been severed. Amamira curled into herself, clutching the pillow as if it might somehow keep her from falling apart. Her chest ached, a dull, aching bruise that wouldn't fade. It wasn't sharp, just endless, like she was suffocating under the weight of everything unsaid. What kind of love was this? She had been made invisible by it, and yet, deep down, a tiny part of her still hoped. She hoped for something, anything, that might mean they could fix this. Maybe tomorrow would be different. Maybe he would change. Maybe, just maybe, this was all temporary. But as the hours passed, the silence settled deeper. And Amamira realized, with a sinking heart, that it wasn't temporary. It was a pattern, a system, a way of being that she had allowed herself to believe was love. The silence was never just silence. It was a message. Amamira sat by the window, her legs curled beneath her, watching the world drift by in an ordinary dance of life. Pedestrians with their own stories, sunlight glittering off passing cars, a woman laughing on the phone as her dog tugged at its leash. Outside, the world continued, vibrant and full of motion. Inside, however, Amamira felt like a shadow, caught between the echoes of the night before and the oppressive silence that hung thick around her. She had once danced with ease, spinning, laughing, singing in the shower, full of life. But not anymore. The music of her spirit had faded, drowned by the weight of unspoken words, by the subtle cruelty of Jace's indifference. She could almost hear the ghost of her former self, a version of her that felt loved, valued, wanted. That version clung to her now like a memory she couldn't quite shake, even as it slipped further from reach. Her hand trembled slightly as it picked up the photo from the dresser drawer, an old snapshot, yellowing at the edges. She had nearly forgotten about it, buried beneath receipts and random papers, tucked away as though it were something inconsequential. But now, as she stared at it, her heart lurched. There she was, her arms around Isla, Maya, and a few others, smiling against the backdrop of the beach. Her face was alive with joy, her skin kissed by the sun, her posture relaxed and carefree. That woman, the one in the photograph, felt so far away. No, not far away. She felt like a stranger, like someone who had once inhabited her body but had long since abandoned it. The weight of the realization crushed her chest. "Where did you go?" she whispered softly. But there was no answer, only the hollow rhythm of her own breath, which seemed too loud in the silence of the room. Hours slipped by in a blur. Jace still hadn't spoken. No texts, no knocks on the door, no acknowledgement of the emotional wreckage he had left behind the night before. She had gone from being his wife to being a ghost, unseen, unheard. And yet, this was nothing new. This wasn't the first time she had felt like this, isolated, invisible, unwanted. The meal she tried to eat stuck in her throat. Her body was here, but her mind, her spirit, they were somewhere else, hovering above the wreckage of her life, watching as she moved through the motions of existence numb. She sat by the window for hours, knees drawn to her chest, staring out at the world that kept turning. She wanted to cry, but the tears felt like they were locked inside her chest, unable to break free. She wasn't crazy, was she? No, she wasn't. She wasn't asking for too much. It wasn't wrong to be tired. It wasn't wrong to say no. Her voice, when it finally emerged, was hoarse, raw, but steady. The words tasted like rebellion. Small, quiet, but powerful in their truth. This wasn't love. It was control dressed up as romance. It was abandonment wrapped in a false veneer of care. She pulled out her journal, the pages creaking with the weight of the truths she had avoided for so long. Jace had made her believe that love had to be earned, that rest was a betrayal, that her needs were the flaws to be hidden away. But as she read her own words, written in the quiet of her soul, she felt something shift. This wasn't love. It never had been. For the first time in years, Amamira didn't feel like she had to justify it herself. She let the words sit there, heavy, honest, freeing. She didn't know what would happen tomorrow. Would he come in with his usual casual shrug, pretending nothing had happened, offering a forced smile, a quick kiss? Maybe. He always did. But this time, she wasn't sure if she would play along. Something had changed. She had finally said no. And while it cost her his affection, it had given her something else. A mirror. And for the first time in a long time, she was starting to see her reflection again. Not perfect, not whole, but bruised. Yes, but not broken. Not anymore. The next morning, the sun rose with its usual casual grace. The light slipped in through the curtains, casting its familiar warmth on the room. But everything felt different. How could the world be so indifferent to her pain? The sky didn't mourn her loss. The world didn't stop to acknowledge what had broken inside her the night before. Amamira had barely slept. Her thoughts were tangled, like knots at the end of an old rope. She had expected something, anything, a text, a sign or a word, but all she heard was the sound of his footsteps. Jace was humming, humming. The casual melody drifted toward her from the hallway. It was a low, careless sound, like he had just returned from vacation. No hesitation, no remorse. He walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, poured himself a glass of juice. He didn't even look in her direction. Not a word about the night before. Not a glance toward her tear-streaked face. He simply went about his morning as if the destruction he had caused didn't even matter. She could feel the blood rush to her ears as she watched him. She could feel the hurt building, but she remained still. She had learned to be still. She had learned to suppress the rage, the hurt, the fear. Because in this house, silence was the weapon of choice. Jace didn't have to say a word to wound her. The absence of an apology was more painful than any verbal attack. When he finally spoke, it was about laundry. "Did you wash my gray hoodie?" Amamira blinked, confused. "What? Why my hoodie?" He didn't look up. It wasn't in the closet. That was it. No mention of last night. No mention of the emotional violence he had just inflicted. No softness, no apology. Just a question about laundry. It felt like whiplash. This was the part she had always hated. The emotional violence followed by a wave of normalcy so smooth, so seamless, that it made her question everything. Was she overreacting? Had she imagined the cruelty? But she hadn't. She knew she hadn't. She remembered how he had looked through her the night before, how her presence had meant nothing to him, how her tears had been invisible. He had chosen silence. He had chosen punishment. And now this casual indifference. I didn't get to it yet. 4 hoodies in the laundry basket, she said quietly, her voice steady, betraying none of the storm inside her. Jace nodded, barely acknowledging her words, and walked away. Just like that, like nothing had happened. And for a moment she just stood there, staring at the empty space where he had been. She wasn't afraid of him. Not anymore. But she was still trying to understand. How could someone claim to love you one moment and then disappear the next? How could they be gentle one day and cold the next? How could he look at her day after day and not see her? That night, they sat together on the couch, watching a movie. Or rather, Jace watched the movie. Amamira sat beside him, trying to remember how to breathe, how to exist in a space that had once been shared between 2 people. There was no intimacy, no conversation, just the quiet hum of the television, just proximity, and still, no apology. She wasn't sure if she would ever get one. The bed, the mattress sighing beneath his weight as though it too were weary of this performance. Jace reached for Amamira's hand with that practiced ease, fingers warm, grip gentle, an intimacy that once would have made her chest flutter with relief. But now her palm lay limp in his, her pulse drumming a warning beneath her skin. He brushed his thumb over her knuckles, his voice a low hush. You look tired, babe. Didn't sleep well? Amamira let the question hang in the air between them, its feigned tenderness sour on her tongue. She studied his face, the boyish grin that never quite touched his eyes, the tilt of his head that screamed concern but dripped calculation. A door inside her, newly unlatched, stayed open. She could feel the draft of her own doubt and clarity swirling through that crack. Outside the window, dawn broke shyly, pale sunlight pushing its way into their room, tracing the ghost of her courage across the quilt. She wanted to stand, to break the illusion by the simple act of rising, but her legs stayed tangled in the covers, her body a reluctant witness to her own awakening. Jay squeezed her hand again, harder now, just for a second, a flicker of his real edge before it vanished behind that smile. Drink your coffee, he murmured, lifting the mug to her lips like he was offering her salvation. The cinnamon drifted up, comforting, familiar, cruel. She turned her head slightly, letting the steam kiss her cheek instead. His brow creased, his smile faltered, but only for a heartbeat. Then he leaned in, brushing a soft kiss against her temple, a rehearsed apology without a single word of remorse. Behind her ribs, something small and fierce pressed against bone, the memory of her list, written by moonlight when his indifference still stung fresh. One of the things I deserve, it chanted through her like a pulse, steady and defiant. She deserved softness that didn't come with conditions, a yes or a no that didn't carry a cost, a love that stayed even when she wasn't easy to hold. Jace pulled back, his eyes scanning her face, searching for the old Amamira, the one who would have smiled, thanked him, leaned into his chest like an obedient wish. But she was not here. Not anymore. In her place sat a woman balancing on the edge of herself, raw but resolute, quietly tallying every sweet lie that dripped from his mouth like poisoned honey. She set the coffee on the nightstand, untouched. The clink of the cup against the wood sounded louder than it should have, like a line drawn in daylight. She didn't flinch when he sighed, when his fingers slipped away, when he stood and adjusted his shirt like he might shake off her defiance. He tried to catch her gaze, tried to pour that charm back into her veins, but she kept her eyes on the slice of sky framed by the window. It was a soft blue, unbothered by their stale performance, patient in its promise that there was more beyond this room. When the door clicked shut behind him, Amamira exhaled a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Her body felt oddly light and heavy all at once, untethered, but still here. She drew her knees to her chest, pressed her cheek to them, let the quiet wrap around her like an honest blanket. Somewhere in the house, Jace moved through the motions of the day, whistling low under his breath, pretending at normal. She wondered how many more cups of coffee he would set before her, how many small kindnesses he'd weaponize to keep her pliant. But beneath the surface of her skin, her anger hummed like an ember, warm and watchful. She would not swallow it this time. She would let it rise slowly, steam turning to flame. She would learn its shape, feed it her truth, tend it like a garden no one could salt to ruin. And when she was ready, she would open the door wide, step out of this quiet prison, and carry herself whole into the morning. He dragged his hand lazily down her spine, the motion so casual it made her skin crawl more than any violence could have. "Sorry I was weird the other night," Jace murmured, his breath warm against the back of Amamira's neck, though it carried no warmth at all. Not real warmth, not the kind that soothes or restores. He did not say sorry for bruising her with silence, nor for walling her off like a prisoner in her own home. He did not say sorry for punishing her because she dared whisper no. He was only weird, as if a chill had passed through him, temporary and trivial. Amamira turned to face him then, truly face him, eyes open and unblinking under the weight of his shallow remorse. For the first time in so long that she could not remember the lad, she did not shrink back into herself. She did not twist her mouth into a brittle smile, nor did she offer him the absolution he expected. She let the pause stretch. It was not forgiveness. It was air, finally hers. "Jace," she said, her voice a quiet fracture that somehow felt stronger than a scream. "Do you remember what you did?" He blinked as though the question were a fly he might shoo away. "I was just upset. I needed space. I blocked you because I was mad, that's all." He spoke it like an incantation, one that used to work. She felt its power fizzle on her skin. "You iced me out because I said I was tired," she said, her tone even, untrembling. His irritation flickered like a match in the dark. "I said I was sorry," he muttered, more to the floor than to her. In fact, he lifted his eyes, sharp and dismissive. "I said I was weird. Same thing." "No," Amamira said, and the word landed solidly in the hush between them. "It isn't." The air seemed to rearrange itself then, subtle but seismic. She did not lift her voice. She did not slam a door. She simply let the discomfort stand. She did not scramble to plaster over it with apologies that were never owed. The silence grew taut, a rope he could no longer tug to pull her back in. He sighed, a thin rattled sound, and turned away, vanishing into the bathroom with no closing remark to bind them. The door clicked shut, but something in Amamira's chest clicked open. That day he tried his usual charade, a favorite song drifting from the speaker, a half smile asking if she wanted lunch out, an idle compliment about her hair, like tossing scraps to a starving dog. But she no longer felt starved. She watched herself drift above the scene, a ghost who'd grown bored of haunting her own house. The horror was never in the blow-ups or slammed doors. It was here in the soft performances, in the gentle illusions meant to tether her. But she saw them now for what they were, masks that, once cracked, revealed no face at all. That night she stood at the stove alone, stirring noodles for one. She did not call to him. She did not send a text asking where he was or if he was hungry. Instead, she carried her plate to the balcony and ate beneath the slow pulse of city lights. Each window in the skyline winked like a secret she had just begun to understand. She was not angry or desperate or broken anymore. She was simply done. She was not yet gone, her shoes still by the door, her clothes still hanging in the closet. But somewhere inside, she had begun folding herself into a suitcase he would never see her pack. These small moments, tiny to the eye, were tectonic shifts beneath her skin. The first quiet rebellion was a silence of her own choosing. His message arrived like clockwork the next morning. A meme, dumb and thoughtless, pretending the exile had never happened. A plea for her to join his play again. She looked at it for a heartbeat, felt the old reflex twitch, then locked her phone. No smile, no reply. The world did not collapse. She breathed easier. The second rebellion was denim and rust. She tugged on the pair of jeans that made her hips feel strong, a blouse in a shade he once called too harsh. He liked her soft, pastel, delicate, palatable. That day she buttoned the blouse to her throat and saw in the mirror not a wife, not a scolded child, but a woman she almost recognized. A flash of flint beneath years of soft velvet. When she turned, Jace's eyes tracked her like a wolf uncertain of its prey. Going somewhere? He asked, suspicion curling the edge of his voice. Yeah. Out? With who? Just me. His brow furrowed, a father correcting a misbehaving child. You didn't say you had plans. She picked up her bag with a shrug that weighed nothing. Didn't know I needed permission. And before he could summon another rule, she slipped out the door. The sun kissed her shoulders like a promise. She walked 3 blocks and claimed a corner table at a cafe that smelled of cardamom and warm bread. She sipped coffee she didn't have to justify. She opened her notes app and wrote it out like a spell. I am not wrong for wanting safety. I am not selfish for wanting warmth. Love without respect is a leash, not love. When she returned, Jace loitered in the kitchen, pretending not to watch her. She moved past him, tea in hand, a hum on her lips, letting her small joy slip through the cracks he could not seal shut. Later, his voice rose over a dish left in the sink, so trivial she almost laughed. She didn't match his pitch, didn't beg or soothe. She just lifted her eyes to him and said evenly, I'm not doing this right now. Then turned away. She half expected a slammed door, a snarled threat, but instead the silence twisted back on him. He felt it too, the steady uncoiling of the leash. At the library days later, she lingered longer than she ever would have dared before. His message arrived sharp and barbed. Where are you? But she let it sit, untouched, for half an hour before she typed, I needed time for myself. No apology, no breadcrumb trail back to his mood. Each of these rebellions was a tiny blazing torch in a corridor that had been pitch black for too long. She was not free yet. Freedom was a horizon, but she was stronger each time she said no. Each time she let her silence be peace instead of punishment. Each time she remembered that her own softness could be a sanctuary rather than a trap. That night, she watched herself in the mirror, hair loose around her shoulders, and wrote again, the more I choose myself, the smaller he becomes. The mask does not frighten me now, it bores me. And one day soon, I will leave him, even if I never slam the door behind me. It ended the way these things always do, with something stupid, a dish towel left too close to the burner. His voice sliced through the room. You're so careless. You could have burned the whole place down. Amamira looked at him then, truly looked, and saw not the towering terror of a man she once feared, but the small, desperate shell he truly was. She folded a shirt with slow precision, the cotton warm under her palms. Talk, she said, her voice a pool of calm. Now that's all you have to say? He demanded, pacing like a caged animal. You never want to take responsibility. She placed the folded shirt atop the neat stack, met his fury with a stillness he could not touch. In that moment she understood. He was not a storm to survive, but a small, frantic wind that would howl until it wore itself out. He wasn't terrifying anymore. He was just unnecessary. The dish towel dangled from Amamira's fingers, damp and unremarkable, an absurd spark for the blaze smoldering behind Jace's eyes. She inhaled once, steadying the tremor that might once have betrayed her. Jace, she said, voice calm as a shuttered room, do you hear yourself? You're shouting over a dish towel. His nostrils flared. He pivoted closer, as though looming would tilt her back into the old pattern. You're missing the point. But she only lifted her chin, gaze unwavering. No, I see the point now. He blinked, something fragile in his certainty cracking. For the first time, she didn't flinch, didn't fold her apology into a shape that fit his anger. She stood, immovable. That frightened him more than her tears ever had. You don't care anymore, do you? The words scraped out of him, half accusation, half plea. Silence answered. The hush that once made her heart ricochet inside her ribs now wrapped itself around her shoulders like armor. When he slammed the door, one final impotent crash, she didn't flinch. She heard the echo fade into the walls, breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. Her whisper slipped into the hollow where fear used to live. I'm done. No shouting match, no frantic apologies trailing behind him, no confessions to bind her wrists. Just this, her heartbeat, steady as the dawn she hadn't seen yet. She hadn't left him. Not yet. But she'd severed the need, the cruel hope that his love could be enough if only she bent a little more. Hours later, his apology buzzed on her phone like a gnat in a dark room. I'm sorry. Two words that once stitched her back together now sagged, limp and redundant. Too late. Too many recycled masks. She didn't dignify it with a reply. Instead, she shut her phone away, let the dark hush settle over her, brewed tea, and opened her journal with a hand that no longer trembled. "It broke me, but I survived," she wrote, the ink seeping into the page like a promise. He doesn't own love's definition anymore. There was no suitcase open on the bed, no frantic packing, no final sobbing flight. Not yet. She didn't need spectacle. She needed an exit stitched together with intention, a secret scaffold rising inside her mind. She named it plainly, "If I Go." A hidden folder in her notes app, an archive of small freedoms, apartment listings that wouldn't break her, numbers of counselors who spoke in kindness, codes to reclaim her own accounts should he dare try to lock her out again. A tiny line typed in the margin, "You are allowed to leave quietly." Each day she carried crumbs of herself out the door, an extra phone charger, a small vial of lavender lotion, her old notebook, its pages still untainted by his cold dismissals. Ordinary things, insignificant enough to overlook, essential enough to mark her trail home to herself. She practiced the word no. Not sharp, not vindictive, just steady. "No, I'm not cooking tonight. No, that joke wasn't kind." When the silence he wielded like a blade fell between them, she left it there. Let it rust. One evening she met Isla at a corner cafe, a place she'd passed 100 times but never stepped into alone, not without the dread of what might greet her at the door later. Isla's hug was soft, her voice bright with recognition and relief. "Look at you," Isla breathed, cupping Amamira's face like she was something newly born. "You look awake." In that dim cafe, over the hiss of steaming milk and muted chatter, Amamira's composure trembled. Her tears ran into her coffee cup, salt dissolving into warmth. "I forgot myself. I let it all vanish." Isla squeezed her hand. "You don't have to explain. You're not crazy, Mira. You're just tired." Tired. The word cracked the cage inside her chest, made space for a breath she hadn't drawn in years. Not broken, not dramatic, just tired. That night, she wrote the date carefully across a blank page. "The day I stopped needing his sorry." Beneath it, in looping script, "Leaving isn't rage, it's reclaiming peace." A week later, she handed in her notice at work, her voice steady under fluorescent lights. She found a small room across the city, a door with a lock that turned at her touch, a window that promised dawn light on her cheekbones. She told no one. Not yet. She needed the quiet. Her kind. Not his weapon. The night before she stepped over the threshold for the last time, Amamira stood in the kitchen, once a stage for so many hushed humiliations. Now just walls, tile, and a door she would soon close for good. She saw it for what it was. An ending. And that was enough. Jace wasn't home the morning she left. He drifted out with his headphones wedged in, blind to the storm gathering behind her in calm. Maybe he knew. Maybe he didn't. She didn't linger to wonder. A backpack, a soft duffel, no dragging suitcases or teary scenes. She left the wedding album on the shelf, untouched. The houseplant stayed, roots deep in a soil she no longer tended. But she slipped one photograph, her 3 years ago, laughing mid-sentence, hair wild as the wind, into her pocket. Not a relic, but a reminder of who she'd never truly lost. Before she closed the door behind her, she folded a note into her journal's spine. "You didn't lose him. You found yourself." The train ride carried her through the city's quiet hum, the weight of her own breath lighter than it had been in years. No more cautious rewrites of her thoughts, no more shrinking to fit the shape he carved out for her. Just street lights flickering past, sunlight warming her arm, a flicker of a smile pressing at the corner of her mouth. Her new room was small, a creaky bed, a window cracked open to let the dawn in, a single shelf waiting for stories she'd left unread. She set her bags down on the floor, pressed her palm flat to her chest. Then she wept, softly, freely. Not from fear, but from the pure shock of her own freedom. That night, her silence did not sting her. It wrapped around her, hush against her skin, like a promise. She fell asleep not bracing for slammed doors, but listening to her own breath. and in the morning, sunlight spilled across her floorboards. She brewed coffee in a chipped mug, crossed her legs on the bare floor, and opened her journal once more. This time, her pen didn't sketch out grief. It etched possibility into the margins. She exhales into the hush of her small, sunlit room, steam curling from the coffee cradled in her hands. The first swallow warms her ribs like a promise. Today, no one is angry that she exists. Amamira lets the silence settle around her like a soft quilt stitched from hard-won freedom. She has carved out this sliver of peace with trembling hands and an iron spine she didn't know she possessed until she walked away. Leaving hadn't shattered her. It had reforged her, link by link, into someone whole. Freedom, she realizes now, rarely shouts. It sighs against your cheek at dawn, brushing your pulse with the hush of "you're safe now," and maybe, just maybe, one day she will open her heart again. Different this time. Wiser. She imagines the curious faces leaning in, hearing her speak of Jace, asking, "How did you stay so long?" She can already hear her own soft laugh, "Because I didn't know I could leave." But now she does, and the knowing is enough. 6 months of new mornings have passed since she closed the door on him. 6 months of windows cracked open to let her curls dance free in the breeze, of laughter that spills out without being strangled halfway up her throat. When her phone buzzes now, she wants to answer it, because these days it might be Isla, sending her a voice note of wild encouragement, or Maya, reminding her she's not alone. Once, just once, Jace's name appeared. "Hey, just wanted to say I miss you." She'd read it, let it linger like a sour taste, then pressed delete without ceremony. She did not need his apology, or his sorrow, or his twisted brand of closure. She had made her own. Her thumb drifts to the small crack etched across her phone screen, a thin, stubborn scar she's carried for years. She runs her fingertip along it, and it snags her backward, dragging her to the night she first taught herself to swallow her voice. 3 years ago, before vows shackled her to him in that cold, glittering ceremony. They had been just lovers then, playing at forever, sitting stiffly at his family's long table. A cousin tossed out a joke, sharp as broken glass, and Amamira had smiled like she'd been taught, a polite curtsy of teeth. Later, in the hush of the car, she let the truth slip. That comment wasn't okay. Jace's hands stiffened on the wheel. Silence puddled in the cabin, thick enough to drown her. "Why do you always have to ruin the mood?" he hissed, eyes on the road, nowhere near her. "Can't you just let things go?" The words struck her ribs harder than any fist. She'd tried to find words to stitch them back together. Gentle, reasonable, desperate. He'd sighed, a weaponized exhale, turned up the music until it drowned her out. She'd pressed her palm against her thigh the whole ride, nails biting skin to keep from crying right there beside him. She'd saved her tears for the bathroom. Mouth buried in a towel, shoulders heaving in secret. When she stepped out, he was lounging in bed, scrolling aimlessly, the argument already buried. She never exhumed it. She learned that night to bury all of it instead, her unease, her fury, her truth. Now she sets the fractured phone down as if laying a ghost to rest. That moment had not been the beginning of his silencing, only the first time she let his cold become her winter. But winter has passed. The plot twist waits, folded and yellowing at the bottom of her leather bag, a letter she should never have found. She's clearing out the clutter of her new life, old receipts, stray pens, half-forgotten lists, when her fingers catch on the envelope. No stamp, just her name, scrawled in Jace's neat, tense script. Confusion flutters in her chest as she peels it open. Amamira, it begins. Her real name, not a pet name softened to dull her edges. The letter is dated 6 months back, inked in a hand that already knew he'd lost her. "Maybe you'll never read this. Maybe that's mercy. I see it now, the shape of what I did to you. How I shrank you, bent your softness into something that served me. I didn't learn how to love without tying knots around it first. Silence was my mother tongue, control my inheritance. But that's not your sin. You were never too sensitive, never too taught. You were more than I could hold without breaking. So I tried to break you first. If you ever leave, and I know you will, I pray it's not because you hate me. I pray it's because you finally love yourself more. Stay gone. Jace. She sits on her rumpled bed, the letter trembling between her fingers. She does not cry. There are no tears left for this man who finally glimpsed the truth and did nothing to rewrite it. She folds the paper once more, tucks it beneath a stack of old notebooks in her bottom drawer, where forgotten things go to die. She does not burn it. She does not frame it. She does not text Isla or Maya to dissect it line by line. It does not deserve that ritual. The only thing that deserves ceremony is this simple truth: she left. Not because she ran out of love for him, but because at last she hoarded a little more for herself. Some endings don't scream vengeance through slammed doors. Some endings slip out in bare feet at dawn, keys in hand, heart thundering toward the quiet possibility of peace. She sips her coffee again, lukewarm now, still sweet, and listens to the soft echo of her own freedom, whispering that she is safe, and finally free.